Am I coming through on the mic, on the speakers? You guys can hear me okay? Great. Well, thanks so much for coming. I hope you guys found space in here. If you need to, maybe you can try to free up some capacity so you get a little breathing room between each other. But I have to tell you, it doesn't matter how many people are here. I'm just really excited to be back on the road, traveling, meeting with customers and partners, and got to sleep in a hotel room. And no one was asking me for breakfast this morning. I didn't have to do any dishes. It's really pretty exciting to be on this trip, and I appreciate you guys being here. My name is Matt Herreras, and I'm from VMware. I am the director of our marketing alliance with our great partner, AWS. And today I'm going to be talking to you about VMware Cloud and our partnership with AWS. By way of introduction, just kind of get my background a little bit, I actually used to work in public sector IT. I was a resource specialist in an IT department at a large university in California. That's where I got my start in technology. Spent some time as a network engineer in financial services. Eventually found my way to VMware, where we did a lot of customer-focused technical consulting with customers and our partners. I spent many years doing that. I spent some time in our product groups, actually developing new products for VMware, and recently joined this role on the partnership between VMware and AWS. So I have a lot of experience with customers who have gone through variations of a journey of infrastructure and application modernization, and seeing a lot of the challenges firsthand, as well as some of the success stories. And that's really the theme of the presentation today, is to talk about what are some of the reasons why people would want to modernize their applications and infrastructure, leveraging the cloud, as well as some of the challenges or barriers, and some unique solutions that can really help accelerate that journey. I did not make my next part of this part of the presentation because it's so fresh and so new. So I want to tell a story about something that actually literally just happened to me. So the theme here is, why are public sector organization leaders turning to IT modernization? IT modernization being a combination of infrastructure and operations modernization as well as application modernization. And so last weekend, I was in Manteca, California, which is a town inland, sort of, in the Central Valley of California. Very, very hot for a soccer tournament for my daughter. And showed up there with my CDC paper vaccine card, my double Pfizer. That was really important. Had it in my pocket, so when I got into the venue, I could show that to somebody. As I mentioned, it was very hot and very dusty, and the tournament went on for hours because, God bless them, the girls kept winning. And finally, actually, they did end up winning the entire tournament. I got a text from my wife on Sunday night late that they won the whole thing, so really proud of her. But when I got back from the tournament, I come home, I got to pack for my trip. I'm flying to DC, throw my shorts, everything in the washer, get ready to go. And I'm headed to the airport and realize that my vaccination card was in the shorts that I just washed, and it's completely destroyed. So cloud, thank you very much. I had, through the state of California, this great sort of QR code that I had gotten from them, but it's sort of a part of the way there. So cloud was absolutely an essential part of this, and as a consumer of cloud services, many of our own constituents and customers have very high expectations of what services the government's going to provide them. And I was a living example of this. It was like, well, it's really great actually that I was able to get this sort of QR code on my phone and stored in the cloud, but it was part of the way there. And my expectation was that my airline boarding pass had this little button. I clicked on it, and it appeared right in my Apple Wallet. Super convenient when I got on the plane, checked through security. But my CDC vaccination cards, which I've used several times while I've been here, not as easily loadable into my phone. So it sort of shows this tension that we face, especially in public sector, where these expectations of consumer-like experience that certainly modern applications and the cloud provides, but then it also highlights some of the challenges, even a state like California, that we've got all this technology in the state, but yeah, there's still these fundamental challenges for how do you bridge that last mile? How do you complete that IT and application transformation? And so really that summarizes the points on the slide here, is that there's this expectation of agility and modernization that is driving this need, and there may be actually just mandates like you need to go to the cloud, you need to modernize applications. But we'll talk about this presentation. That's easier said than done. So what are some of the core challenges? Well, funding's a big challenge, and across public sector, it's a really vast arena of funding challenges. But some challenges might be, well, you can only spend CapEx, or the budgeting cycles prevent you from getting ahead on strategic projects, because to keep the lights on in your current projects, you consume pretty much your entire budget, but there's no real room left in either it's the money or it's the people to be able to go and start working on that next thing, whether it's IT transformation or it's application modernization. And I already mentioned citizens, I admit it, here I was being grumpy, like, why can't I put my vaccination record into my phone like I do my boarding pass? So the expectations are totally unfair, right? Because public sector is being measured against the private industry, which of course doesn't have the same regulations or budgeting challenges that the public sector does. But there they are, those are the expectations. And of course, you think about all the information now, including my vaccination record, social security number, et cetera. The same people who are providing these services are obviously faced with some of the most threatening security threats out there. And there's a pressure to modernize applications, which is one of my anecdotes I'm going to share with you here today about modernizing an application, especially when you're talking about some of the earliest adopters of technology, which is public sector, some of the earliest adopters of mainframe computing and early applications. And how do you jump from being an early adopter to somebody who's providing an agile cloud service and a new operational model around IT services? And finally, if you combine the legacy with what has been modernized so far, you're adding another layer of complexity, whether it's operational or technical or security, to an already challenging situation. So these are some real fundamental challenges, and I've heard this from many customers over time. And one of the approaches to addressing these challenges, whether it's on the infrastructure, operational, or application side, is to look at hybrid cloud, which is a combination of taking what you have on-prem and running it in a cloud operating model, and combining that with things that you can run in a cloud provider, like AWS, for example. And there's sort of a couple of areas that our customers think about their decision-making when it comes to hybrid cloud. But think about the application. So they've got their existing applications and new applications that they'd like to build. That's one layer of the consideration matrix. Another is the actual application transformation, and there's several strategies about how a customer might go about doing this. They might completely re-platform an application, taking a legacy application that sits on an AS400 and re-platforming it to open system, something like Linux, for example. That'd be one example of doing that. Another one would be to refactor or maybe totally rebuild an application into a new microservices-based application context. It might be to take existing applications and simply just rehost them on new infrastructure. That might be part of the decision-making about how you try to get a better experience from existing applications. There might be simply deciding to just step back and say, I'm just going to retain some applications as they are, because the costs or some other requirement means I'm going to have to keep that on a mainframe, at least for the foreseeable future. So that is part of the decision matrix here. And then there's the other one, which is to retire an application, because there is some SaaS-based service that supersedes or provides a better experience that legacy application did. So that's another part of it. Just say, hey, we're going to retire it. We're going to use a SaaS model, something like an HR application, for example. And then there's the infrastructure layer. So there's a lot of choices to think about at this layer, too. So you may want to run infrastructure in a local cloud. So like the state of California, we have this government cloud service that the agencies can subscribe to if they want to and move their applications to that. That's one option. It's a local cloud. And it's be sitting right there in Sacramento near the agency headquarters. That frees up space in their data center. That's one approach to doing it. Another one might be to go to AWS, right? Go to a cloud provider and evacuate the data center that way and consume services from that. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. Another one might be saying, well, can we reproduce a cloud operating model like I get from either a government-supplied cloud or a cloud provider and replicate that operational experience on premises? There's ways to doing that as part of the strategy. And finally, let's not forget about the edge. And the edge is a broadly defined thing in public sector. You might have remote sensors out in a forest. That's a kind of edge, right? Then you might have something bigger, which might be you're an agency and you provide transportation, related services, and you got to get it out to either Manteca or San Francisco. These are all sort of branch office scenarios, which you might consider the edge, but that's absolutely part of the mandate for public sector. And you have to think about all these different ways that infrastructure can be deployed and consumed from. And the way I like to think about it is that the cloud is not really a place or a destination. It's more of an operating model, or if it's an application, it's more of a runtime, like what context you can run your applications in. And that then leads, if that's true, if it's true that you can think about what cloud is in these different contexts, then your decision becomes also one of, okay, well, who's going to manage that? And in public sector, this is a huge challenge. So many of my customers in public sector have said to me, look, I've got great people, but 3 of them are about to retire. The other ones are brand new, and they're being courted by private industry every single day. So that opens up this communication about like, okay, what if you could have that managed by somebody else, right? And so that's very much the cloud model that AWS provides. Like, hey, we will take care of these burdens for you so you can focus what resources you do have on the primary mission at hand. And I think that, in public sector, it's maybe even more important to have these options available than it is even in private sector. And then the other option would be saying, well, but some of this might be better served if it's customer managed, right? So it's retooling your IT teams to be cloud operators, not IT admins. And that would be a customer managed context. All of these are valid considerations and part of the decision matrix about consuming hybrid cloud. So if you buy the argument that, okay, hybrid cloud sounds like it's a way to address some of these challenges for public sector customers, that doesn't mean there are no challenges with getting to hybrid cloud, right? One of them is, obviously, if 2 sides of the hybrid cloud don't match, then you've got a problem because you don't have consistent infrastructure between point A on-prem and point B in the cloud. And that, of course, has challenges around, getting that agility that you'd like to have because you've got this mismatch in the underlying infrastructure, and that also means then operational model is different. You get a reduced agility, right, because these things don't match, right, and because the migration of an X number of workloads to the cloud, especially if there's a mismatch in the underlying infrastructure or operational model, could take a very long time. And in many cases, public sector doesn't have the option of long time. I mean, one of the use cases I'm going to talk about a little bit is whether it's a fire, a flood, an earthquake, or a pandemic, the services that public sector are providing to their constituents, those are absolutely mission critical, urgent, right this minute. And so there has to be a way to not be bogged down by the hopefully beneficial migration to hybrid cloud. You got to get there quickly. They're higher risk too. So one of the big risks is around the skills issue that I mentioned. I had one customer who said, look, I've got 1 mainframe operator left in my organization, and they retire next month. And the 2 people who are his understudies, they're brand new, and I don't know how long I can retain them. So I'm looking to have to outsource all of the sort of operations and maintenance of my mainframe infrastructure. And it doesn't matter if it's a mainframe, but it could easily be an open system that's considered on premises. And that doesn't go away if you go to hybrid cloud. You still need people who can do these things. So you need options for how you get over some of these operational risks. And then, of course, there's higher costs associated with doing this. So if you're trying to refactor applications, there is time, and there's money baked into that as well. People have to know the applications, or you have to hire consultants who know them. There's cost associated with that. And I know from firsthand experience that this one customer I was referencing who had the mainframe, they said, look, we'd love to virtualize that application, whether it's with VMware or in the cloud. The reality is the cost associated with replatforming that application is basically saying that your X amount of TCO ROI is completely wiped out by how expensive it's going to be to replatform that application. And so these are some challenges that are real for our customers about how do they even get to this hopefully beneficial hybrid cloud model. So for those of you who don't know, VMware and AWS have a partnership, a technology and business partnership called VMware Cloud on AWS. And it's directly targeted at this hybrid cloud use case to deliver a modern hybrid cloud experience. So what do you get from that? And I'll get into more sort of technical details in a minute, but the basic fundamentals are, on the VMware side, you get this existing enterprise software-defined data center experience that exists in many data centers today in public sector. You get a support for a broad range of workloads. I mean, vSphere, VMware-based virtual machines have a long history of working with ISVs to provide supported acceptance of those applications running inside those vSphere-based VMs. So that's a huge advantage you get. And I already alluded to this, but many organizations have spent the time and do have people who know VMware, and so they're able to leverage those, that broad, deep enterprise data center experience that many of those people have using VMware technology. Then the other side of it is AWS, right? Huge amount of flexibility and scale and a really compelling consumption and economic model for cloud computing. And absolutely the broadest set of services that can be applied to applications that live within that context. So that's really powerful too. And finally, AWS has massive global scale and reach, which allows our public sector customers to work in an operational environment that allows them to extend their services globally, which can be very compelling. You think about a university, for example, that doesn't just think about what services they're going to provide to researchers in the US, they have to think globally about where these researchers might be. So these combined advantages really are at the heart of the compelling value proposition for a hybrid cloud solution that's based on VMware and AWS. As a quick little tour of the history, we've been doing this for actually a long time. I mean, we announced it in 2016. We launched it in 2017. We brought our first AWS service, RDS, onto a vSphere-based environment inside this service back in 2018. In 2019, we announced taking AWS Outposts and bringing them as part of the solution as well. So that's an interesting sort of way of addressing this, edge or branch office scenario as well. And then by 2020, AWS is absolutely the preferred cloud context to run vSphere-based workloads, hands down. So we're really excited about this partnership, and that's really the heart of what we're going to be talking about today, about the how and the why of getting value out of this combined solution to address some of these challenges I mentioned. So I'll share another anecdote with you about one of my actual customers, and I've been alluding to them a couple times. And so they have a complex environment that includes old legacy applications that were built for AS400. They've got VMware-based workloads because they were able to virtualize and do maybe the first wave of kind of a cloud modernization effort. And they've got services that consume and run in AWS. So they have a lot of these elements in place. And what they're looking for is a way to complete that journey or accelerate that journey. And so some of the benefits of doing it, there are really kind of 5 key things I want to hit on here, is the migration. So migration can be seamless if you have like for like. So you have point A, let's say on premises, and point B in AWS. If you have the exact same underlying infrastructure and operational model, then you're able to do very fast migrations to the cloud because you're not having to re-platform, retool, retrain in the middle of that migration process. So that's one key benefit of this. Another one is it's as a service. Now, of course, when you think about AWS, you expect, well, it's a service, it's a cloud service, you consume it. But what we're talking about is taking the VMware software-defined data center elements that many of our customers already know and love and consuming them as a service inside of AWS, where VMware is the service provider for that infrastructure. So it takes, somewhere like 70% of the operational burden of deploying, building, maintaining IT infrastructure on VMware out of the hands of the customer, allowing them to focus more on the strategic initiatives that I was talking about earlier. So we talked about the value of this consistency for the migration. Well, it's also applicable for when you're actually running it. Because if you have consistent IT operations, infrastructure and operations between the on-premises environment and the cloud-based environment, you have a really great way to, again, relieve the burden on perhaps limited IT resources. So you have a small staff, but they know VMware, they can operate across these different contexts. These workloads are portable, so it's as easy to move them from point A to point B as to move them back from point B back to point A. That's actually a huge advantage for some of our customers because they actually have a mandate of some kind, whether it's internally or externally imposed, to be able to move their workloads back to a particular location on premises. And if they can do that, again, without having to retool and refactor, they're able to meet that requirement that they have. So that portability is really key here. And finally, if you think about the way applications are going, you're not necessarily talking about something that is monolithic, right? So you may have some combination of traditional IT applications, right, on a kind of a client-server model, let's say. That may be one part of the service that you're thinking about. Another part of the service may actually be able to be converted to a microservices-based framework, so containerized and then orchestrated by Kubernetes. That may be another part of it. And this service might dramatically benefit from the kinds of services you can consume from AWS. That's when we think about a service. It's not like one thing, right? It's got multiple aspects to it. And within the context of this hybrid cloud solution, customers can get the benefit of all three of those things. A service that combines traditional VM-based application workloads, as well as new containerized microservices, Kubernetes orchestrated workloads, that can then consume services from AWS in the solution. So this is 5 powerful benefits to bringing all these things together within one context. So maybe a little bit deeper into like what exactly we're talking about. What did we engineer together? I mean, this isn't just a some sort of pricing and packaging exercise. I mean, this is a deeply engineered solution between the two companies. So you get the VMware software-defined data center running on AWS bare metal, but it's delivered, supported, and operated by VMware. So we're prime on managing the infrastructure, taking the operational burden off of the customer's hands. It's on-demand capacity with flexible consumption, so you literally can go there and say, I need capacity. That's the beauty of AWS, right? You go and consume it right away. Well, that includes the VMware components. They just, boom, they deploy them for you. So that's really compelling. There's the operational consistency with on-premise, so you're operating one environment. You get seamless large-scale workload portability. We talked about the movement across, from site A to point A to point B and back again. You get the global reach of the AWS footprint. That's really powerful. And you get direct access to native AWS services. So when we bring these workloads from on-premises and bring them into this VMware Cloud and AWS solution, we're able, through backplane connections, to allow those great AWS services to work upon the data that's been migrated into the cloud service. And this is a really powerful concept because what is the most important asset probably of any organization, whether it's public sector or private? It's the data. And then the services you can apply and bring to bear on that data to then enhance the experience for your consumers, constituents, students, faculty, whatever it is, they benefit greatly from these AWS-based services. But the workloads are already brought in, the connectivity happens on the back end, you're able to apply those services directly to that migrated data. So don't think just about the application, it's also about the data that's been migrated. So I mentioned the global reach and span of AWS. Well, the partnership also mirrors that span. So whether your infrastructures and applications are located in the Americas, in EMEA, or in the Asia-Pacific region, we have facilities in all those locations. And they benefit from the work we've done with AWS on a variety of security and compliance frameworks. So whether it's ISO, whether it's SOC 2 Type 2, and we'll get to GovCloud in a second here in FedRAMP. But when you migrate your workloads, you inherit all of that compliance and security work that we've done together with AWS in all of these regions where you deploy it. So I hinted at this. So if you hadn't heard the news already or seen it on social media, this partnership, VMware Cloud and AWS, our GovCloud solution in the US, has achieved FedRAMP High ATO. And that was just announced, and we're really excited about this development because it opens up a whole new avenue for customers and partners to work together on a solution that meets those FedRAMP requirements. We've achieved FedRAMP Ready high status with the JAB, as well as we are in process of achieving our DoD IL5 authorization. So these are things we're working on, and I want to make everyone in mind, obviously you couldn't get some of these certifications where this were not true, but that VMware employees are US citizens based in the US who operate this GovCloud environment. So we're really excited about this announcement, and we worked very hard with the AWS team to go and implement that. So we talked a little bit about some of the technology challenges and motivators for this, but there are some compelling cloud economics, let's call them, behind this. And I think that many people who have looked at AWS have already realized that there's a real benefit to the economics, but I want to call out a couple of things about the hybrid cloud solution we're talking about that are particularly interesting. So there's the lower TCO than trying to run a cloud on a traditional on-premises data center. So even if a customer were to retool their IT operations and train their staff to be more cloud operators than IT admins, there are still inherent baked-in costs to running infrastructure on premises that when you move to a cloud solution, like a hybrid cloud solution like we're talking about today, you're just going to reduce those costs, like a 59% reduction in the recurring savings around the infrastructure and operations of maintaining it. And I alluded to these things already about the operational burden that we take off the customer's plate. That returns back in a compelling ROI. And then this migration thing. Well, so there's not only time involved, but there's actually real measurable savings you get by eliminating the work of the prep work, if you will, of the prep refactoring, retooling in order to migrate workloads to a cloud environment, right? That's baked into the solution. So that's a dramatic savings there. But then I think the real thing is the reduction in time from months down to years. And this is a provable thing where you have customers who had looked at what their cloud migration would have been like and then used the solution and said, well, we reduced it from years down to months in that migration for all these reasons that I just talked about. The consistency of operations, the ease of migration, having like for like on both sides, all these things basically weigh in to reducing the costs and the time associated with it. So, kind of summarizing some key benefits here. We're going to get into some use cases in a second that might be applicable to some people in the room here. So you get the best of both worlds, that great VMware enterprise software experience that you may already have experience with, combined with that flexibility and speed of AWS. This zero cost refactoring, this is really big, so that's a 69% lower migration cost and time reduction. Leveraging those existing skills, that's going to have a huge, weight lifted off of your costs to a cloud migration. And then, measurable cloud economics of running your infrastructure, continuing, not just the migration, but once you have it up and running, your ongoing costs are reduced compared to if you tried to do the exact same thing on premises without this hybrid cloud operating model. And so one of our customers, actually, Neil Smith, the government of the Scottish government, basically did the analysis and basically said, it's 5 to 6 times more expensive running their either moving to a native cloud than if they were to run it inside this hybrid cloud solution for these reasons that I mentioned before. So they actually saw the measurable benefit of running this hybrid cloud service versus just going to pure native cloud, or even then, let's say, another customer who might be running it independently on premises in a traditional IT model. So some use cases. So I'll quickly summarize these and I'll go into them a little bit deeper. So you got data center modernization, you got data center extension, cloud migration, you've got next generation applications, and you've got disaster recovery. These are some of the most common reasons that we see customers trying this hybrid cloud service and then buying more of it. And these things are sometimes self-reinforcing. So data center modernization, look, you've got the data center consolidation scenario. So many of our customers have older data center environments. There could be challenges around street power, cooling, and if they wanted to bring in some new project that required data center space, they don't have it, right? And then imagine just for a second here, blowing out your entire budget just by bringing in new power capacity into an old data center. The permitting, the environmental reviews, the drilling, the disruption on the streets, all that stuff weighs heavily on especially public sector IT organizations. So if they can modernize their data center by freeing up capacity without having to do some of these very costly and burdensome activities, they have a huge advantage. It accelerates that IT transformation to a cloud operating model. you get what I would call a DevOps-ready IT environment for government. Because again, this operational model we talked about really is a break from the mold of traditional IT, which is more rigid, I would call, compared to that really agile DevOps model. And that can be applied to not just the application infrastructure, but also IT infrastructure, that concept of DevOps. Not saying that it's the same as DevOps, I'm saying that concept of that agile DevOps model can be applied to the IT infrastructure. When you think about extending your data center through cloud migration, you could pick certain applications that you target that you'd like to be able to migrate. So there's a lot of flexibility in carving out pieces of what it is of the services that you provide, and then using cloud migration as a way to go and extend your data center. So a great example of this is a major university. They had a lot of IT infrastructure that they realized was not core to their mission, right? These were keeping the lights on kinds of application activities. What was core to their mission was the kinds of services they provide to research scientists, right? Computational research. That's something that was way more valuable to the mission. By putting this in real terms for a university, the grant money and ability to recruit and draw top talent of professors from around the world depended heavily on their ability to provide them services to do their research, not for them to print or for administrative applications or for HR applications. So you think about this university and said, if we can get some of those applications that are not core to our mission into a public cloud scenario, we could dedicate more of our data center space, power, cooling, and IT talent to expanding the services around computational research that had previously kind of existed just within departmental research data centers, which is not a very scalable model. But the university then could bring all of this grant money and research talent into one focused area. That's core to their mission. So that's a great example of using a hybrid cloud model to extend not just IT services, but really the core mission of the entity that's trying to employ them. Next generation application development and delivery. So I'll summarize this one by saying that, again, if you're consuming most of your budget by just trying to keep the lights on, maintain administrative applications, there's not a lot of room in budget, time, and IT resources to then go and say, well, we have a project to go and modernize this application. It's core to the mission of our organization. We'd like to be able to do that, but we just can't find the space, funding, capacity, et cetera, to go and kick that off. Well, this kind of scenario really frees that up. A hybrid cloud scenario allows you to say, we're either going to maybe run these test environments in a cloud provider like AWS. That'd be one way they could do it. They could also sort of do the inverse of that and say, let's free up some of our data center space so we can do some of this work on-prem. So these are really compelling reasons to do this. Disaster recovery is a huge one. So fortunately, during my career at VMware, I worked with many customers, a lot of public sector entities that provide mission-critical services to constituents, citizens, students, faculty, whatever it is. And when a disaster happens, it's something that's even, private sector IT can sort of say, well, we sort of we can recover. But the public sector, they're providing services that might have first responders that are dependent upon that service. Well, you've got to have a DR solution. Well, these are extremely expensive to set up originally, but then to maintain them and never use them, it's a huge burden on IT resources and annual budgets. If you can use a hybrid cloud scenario to basically create a DR solution that exists in the cloud, that you have a much more beneficial economic model for how you're setting that infrastructure aside, so disaster recovery as a service, that is a game changer for a public sector entity that might have, for example, not just provide a service in the event of an emergency, but also go through an audit to prove that they have a DR solution. So just think about the ability to free up budget that was otherwise allocated to a sort of a hard, land-based, using land-based as a metaphor, inside an existing data center that you purchase capacity in or through some sort of colo facility, you could free up all of that space, infrastructure, money, and energy and bring that to a hybrid cloud solution. That is a huge advantage to accelerating what I would say is more core to the mission of a public sector entity. So this is a story that I really love because it's one that many of us probably lived through this, right? So suddenly there's a pandemic, our kids are home. How does a school system district provide services to the faculty and the students? And I went through this, so I have 3 kids, different ages, different schools. So we went through this, so some of them did really well, some of them not so great. So the small Catholic school that my youngest daughter goes to, they did a very good job initially, but they really struggled with the, what I would call replatforming of student-teacher applications for learning. So they were able to get things up and running with cloud right away, but then when it came to like missing homework and tracking who had turned in what, it was a total nightmare. And I think that my youngest daughter suffered academically from that because she was frustrated, confused. She couldn't figure out, I turned my assignment in, but every single one of these applications had a different way to turn in the assignment, right? In another context, my oldest son and my middle daughter, oldest son's at university now, middle daughter went to a much larger school. They had taken their virtual desktops, they turned their desktops into virtual desktops and were able to provide consistent services to the faculty and the students. Well, this could be replicated amongst a whole variety of use cases where you don't have to re-platform the desktop, if you will, experience and re-platform the applications that people need to consume. You're just taking an existing working framework that students and faculty already know and bringing it out of a data center that doesn't have the capacity to scale. I mean, look, even if the data center at the school did have the capacity to scale up all those desktops, getting new infrastructure in place during the pandemic, I mean, I don't know if you've gone through this, but like I ordered a stove in December of 2019. It's maybe coming in November. I don't know what we're going to bake our turkey in. We'll hope for the best. But the point is that if you can't get a stove in place during the pandemic, think about the compute, storage, network, and the people on site to go and deploy that stuff. Impossible. I mean, you're talking about like 2 to 3 years. I mean, that didn't help any students. So in this case, very similar to my own experience, is this, this customer of ours during the pandemic was able to really quickly deploy over 1,700 desktops and keep that student-teacher experience consistent, but to do it very quickly by leveraging a hybrid cloud service, which is VMware Cloud on AWS. Very similar story here. This one I'll just kind of highlight a couple more specific things. This school district had a similar goal to go and get over 10,000 of these workloads deployed, and they were able to do it through this hybrid cloud service. A couple of key pain points: they needed to improve the resiliency and have infrastructure flexibility to reduce their IT operating costs. So again, I spent a lot of time with school districts. God bless them, those people, those IT people who are trying to maintain the infrastructure and the workloads and the desktops and all of that at the same time, it is extremely challenging because everybody knows that desktops, I mean, I know that from my own experience, but we're always breaking them, right? That's happening in school districts. But the VDI scenario, virtual desktop infrastructure, delivered as a service in the cloud, dramatically contains a lot of the operational chaos surrounding sort of student and or faculty owned and managed desktops. And so that's a huge part of what they were trying to do. And they were able to scale that infrastructure instantly. Again, going back to this point I just made about like, could they have done that? Yeah, they probably had the talent and if they had the time, but they couldn't even get the infrastructure to do it. So, and oh, by the way, no one was allowed on campus anyway to go and deploy any of these things. So, I mean, this is the kind of disaster that nobody planned on. But that suddenly this hybrid cloud model immediately jumped into the forefront of people's mind as far as something that immediately delivered value. And that's setting aside the other kinds of disasters, flooding, snowstorms, fires, earthquakes, here and in California. Government organization in Europe, just 3 weeks to migrate complete disaster recovery solution from their on-premises environment to VMware Cloud on AWS, right? That is unheard of. When I worked in financial services, it took us 3 years to deploy our disaster recovery solution, and financial services supposed to have all this money and people unlimited. I mean, trust me, 3 years to go and get that thing up and running, and they don't even ask me about how the tests went, right? It wasn't great. So, and I also highlight a couple things. When you go through these migrations, they had zero downtime during these migrations. So this was really powerful to take an existing DR facility and literally be able to shut it down and apply all that energy, time, and money to something else, leveraging this hybrid cloud solution. So beyond the core partnership between VMware and AWS, I'd like to point out that we have a growing partner ecosystem, so over 600 VMware Cloud and AWS solution competent partners. So whether you're a customer or partner in the room here, you may find common cause with this solution. Then there's 40 plus VMware Cloud and AWS master services competent partners, so this high level of competency around all these things we've been talking about, whether it's standing up the infrastructure, migrating workloads, providing DR, or modernizing applications. We've got deep expertise in our mutual partner ecosystem to go after these kinds of challenges. A growing 100 plus ISV, so these independent software vendors who are part of this partner ecosystem. That's great because a customer may already be consuming one of these. Well, that can also now be part of this hybrid cloud solution, so they're getting that same benefit from an ISV's technology in this hybrid cloud. And we've got over 300 partner-ready solutions to address many more than just the use cases that I just discussed. You can learn more here at the VMware Marketplace. There's something I want to mention to you. So some of you in the room might be familiar with existing VMware technology. You're running like, well, how do I reconcile this really great hybrid cloud consumption model that you just talked about, Matt, with all of my licensing across different products, VMware in different contexts, whether it's a on-premises data center, you've got VMware vSphere, vSAN, NSX deployed in various configurations. Maybe you've even brought that together with VMware Cloud Foundation, which is a great way to consume all of those components together in one licensing, but you'd like to migrate that to something more cloud-like, subscription-based. That's what VMware Cloud Universal is. It's basically taking these suite of products from VMware, these software-defined data center products, I mentioned them before, vSphere, vSAN, NSX, and whether you had purchased them a la carte or you had purchased them through something like VMware Cloud Foundation, you can transfer those licenses into this subscription model under VMware Cloud Universal. And if you've got some of this that you've already consumed, let's say with AWS, for example, and VMware Cloud and AWS, or maybe even you've looked at VMware Cloud on Dell EMC, which is basically taking this VMware Cloud on AWS solution and dropping it on top of hyperconverged infrastructure appliances inside a data center as a managed service. So if you purchase VMware solutions in any combination of these different contexts or licensing schemes I just talked about, you can leverage Cloud Universal to bring them under one umbrella. So we've got a booth downstairs in the expo. I could see a couple of my old friends from our sales force here in the room here. If you wanted to talk to them about how could I refactor my licensing to take advantage of the subscription model, please reach out to them. Raise your hand. You have VMware sales people there, just so that people know how to find you, and reach out to them either down at the booth or after the session. So that's VMware Cloud Universal. Oh, I left out that when you become part of this Cloud Universal program, you get the advantage of VMware Success 360, which is really like an envelope of help wrapped around your migration to hybrid cloud. That includes everything from how do I learn more about it, how do I do the kind of analysis I need to do to figure out how much I need to get, how much it's going to save me, as well as once you've acquired it, well, we take care of you after you've acquired it to make sure you have a great ongoing customer experience, which is absolutely very much part of the cloud model. I like this to think about the Metro card, or in my case, we have this thing called the Clipper card in the Bay Area, which I love because I literally charge it up, and then I can ride the ferry. I can rent one of those little bikes. I don't do that very often, but if I did, I could take one of those bikes. I could jump on BART, I could get on Muni, I could take a bus. Right? And so obviously I thought I'd point out that if you've never been to San Francisco and you know the DC metro area, somehow they are doppelgangers. The BART system and the DC metro are like the same trains. It's very surreal for me when I ride it. But the point is that this MetroCard concept, this VMware Cloud Universal, allows you to have this very flexible consumption model, much like the Clipper card or MetroCard. So just kind of summarize here some key business outcomes here. Hybrid cloud, used to address IT and organizational mission imperatives. So there's accelerating innovation, which we've talked about, whether that's evacuating your data center, making space for new projects, or whether that's redirecting resources, a way of large monolithic CapEx budgets to doing something so you could create the budgetary space to go and build out a team around a new service that's going to help you innovate the service you provide. You can uplift your operations, so you're actually delivering a higher level of service to your constituents or our citizens, and doing that in a way that dramatically reduces the cost, a compelling total cost of ownership, a very fast switch from CapEx to OpEx, and really compelling migration scenarios where you're really talking about dramatically reducing the cost and zero downtime during those migrations. So, if this sounds pretty good and you'd like to learn more about this, well, how do you kind of take the next step? So make sure you understand VMware Cloud and AWS and how it fits into your cloud strategy, because not every customer is going to need this solution, and some may not realize that they need it. So it's really important to understand how would this fit into my overall IT strategy. Make sure you do the analysis, whether it's a technical analysis of what you can do with a hybrid cloud solution, or whether it's the business case justification to go find the funding to go after and go do this, and try it. So we've got a bunch of resources between that we've developed between VMware and AWS. So and I'll show a list of that in a second here. But give it a try. I mean, obviously, the beauty of cloud computing is that it's really easy to get experience with it, and this is no different. So you loved it so much, you're ready to buy it right this second? Well, you could scam this right now and literally get on your phone and you could buy some right now. I wouldn't stop you. And if you wanted to go back to your room and maybe contemplate it a little bit, you can go to the link here and check it out. And then when it comes to resources, we've got some great technical content. So you can go and just explore, choose your own journey of all this great technical content. You can follow us on social media to see what's coming. And VMworld, if you guys know, is coming up in about a week's time. So there's always news around VMworld that I encourage you guys to check it out and follow. If you're not going to be attending the event, it is free. You can attend it if you want to, because it's a virtual event again this year. That's one advantage of these virtual events. It's easy to attend. And you can actually get hands-on experience for the IT teams. You want to give somebody actually the tools, they can go to our hands-on labs and actually try the solution and get hands-on experience to build that confidence. And then we actually have curated some of these things that I just described, whether it's technical content or business content, into our Quick Start series, which is, like I said, it's like a concierge service for bringing all these things together so you can pick a learning path that meets your needs to get up and running quickly. That's it. I may be ahead of time, but I don't know if there are any questions for me or our salespeople. Happy to address them now, or come by and check us out at the booth. Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming. It's great to see you guys. It's good to be back in person again. Thanks.